What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to NFL Turf Talk. On today's show, we are wrapping up the AFC by breaking down the AFC North Conference. I'm one half of your host, Dylan Davis. To my right, my co-host, Scotty. My man, what is going on this Thursday afternoon?
Not much, man. Just getting along with the work day and getting ready for the weekend. I'm ready to check out for the week. So, yeah, man, I'm having a good time today, though. Nonetheless, I'm excited to get into this division. It's a lot better than the division we discussed last
That
weekend.
it is.
But that being said, hey, apparently a bunch of people were interested in the AFC South, and we were not understanding that going in. But that video did a lot of views and got a few comments back from people. So hoping that we get similar, reception for this division, because I find this division a lot more competitive, a lot more interesting as well. So
For sure.
Looking forward to this, man. Good conversation to be had here.
For sure. This is if not the toughest, the toughest division in the entire National Football League.
Yeah.
Every team's going to be competitive this year. Obviously, you have the Cincinnati Bengals, who have been to the AFC Championship the last 2 years. You have the Baltimore Ravens getting a healthy Lamar Jackson back. They bring in Odell Beckham Jr., make some moves offensively. They're looking to compete for the division title as well. The Browns, Deshaun Watson gets a full year under his belt. They move on from Kareem Hunt, so it is officially the Nick Chubb show if it hasn't been enough already. And then the Steelers, man. The Steelers were the bottom feeder of this division last year, or right above the Browns. But Kenny Pickett got better as that season progressed. They're heading into this season obviously healthy on the defensive side of the ball. You have some weapons like Deontay Johnson, George Pickens. You went out, signed down Robinson, Pat Freiermuth. You have Miles Boykin. So they have some weapons offensively if Kenny Pickett can figure it out. So I'm expecting this division to be extremely, extremely competitive. Obviously last year we broke down the AFC West and we thought, oh, this might be an historic division. All four teams could make the postseason. And it turned out, one was a fraud and two of them were a train wreck. So that division wasn't all it lived up to be. I think this one will. Every time these teams meet, it's a gritty, hard-fought game. It doesn't matter where it's being played. It's always a good game. So it's going to be a lot of fun to break it down today, man. I guess let's start with the offensive side of the ball. I believe we start on defense last week. So start offensively this week. This is a tough division to rank, to be honest with you. I think we're both going to have the same number one because of just who the wide receiving core is. The best quarterback, for my money, obviously, in this division. Second best quarterback in the National Football League. But the other three, I think, are all pretty competitive. So starting at number 4, offensive rankings here, I do have the Pittsburgh Steelers still. I think that they have maybe more weapons than a Cleveland Browns team do. But when you talk about quarterback play, I know Deshaun Watson came back and struggled in the last couple weeks of the season last year, but I'm expecting with a full offseason under his belt, a full 17-game stretch, that maybe he won't be the top 10, top 5 type of quarterback he was a few years ago, but I'm expecting him to be in the better half of the league. So at number 4, I do have Kenny Pickett in the Steelers. I don't know if Kenny Pickett's ready to take that stride yet. And I think this team is more based defensively than they are on offense. Who do you have at number 4?
Yeah, I actually went with the Steelers as well, man. It comes down to the quarterback position for me as well. Kenny Pickett versus the rest of these guys. Even Deshaun Watson, I know he didn't have the best comeback coming back in week 11 last season. He didn't get a full season to get that chemistry built. You look back to the last season that he actually played in this league and actually played a full season, 2020. Ultimately, he did play 16 games in that season. I'll go over his stats once I get to the next one here. But nonetheless, you have to look at the Steelers and you have to look directly at Kenny Pickett. And the simple truth last year is while Kenny Pickett showed some signs here and there that he could be a decent threat at quarterback, obviously he can use his legs a good bit. He can scramble. He can move around in the pocket. He's a Pittsburgh guy, right? So they're kind of invested in him from that standpoint. And it seems like he's got a good head on his shoulders. Now, the numbers, they don't look great, man. He had 7 touchdowns, 9 interceptions. So you never want to see that. So with that being said, he has to come in at the bottom of the quarterback rankings in this division. which in return, who's going to get your weapons the ball? That means their offense has to be last. It's as simple as that for me. And when you look at even the weapons outside of, outside of Kenny Pickett, looking at, say, a Najee Harris, who going into last season, he was pretty renowned as a good
Yeah.
back. Coming out of last season, kind of looking down on him in a sense, right? He's not regarded as high as he was coming out of his rookie season. So I'm looking at that. Can they help him out in the run game? We'll see. That's to be determined. They do have some quality receivers, but you add Allen Robinson. He was a train wreck in LA when they picked him up. George Pickens, he seems to be like a good to great young receiver as far as skill set.
I think they have a very, very good wide receiver.
His head, though, I worry about his mental, man. You see a lot in the practices, training camp, pushing off, celebrating in DB's faces after a big catch. That can cost your team, man. So he's got to get that together, which I'm sure Mike Tomlin can help him with that. And then Deontay Johnson, while he had a ton of targets last year, the production just did not fit with those targets. So that offense overall, not sold on it, not sold on Kenny Pickett, but I do think there is potential there just to give them a fair shake.
No, I think it's a great point. And it's kind of what I was setting up was just the fact that when you're in a division with three other teams that have pretty prolific offenses, if they're all being ran correctly. We know what Cincinnati brings. We'll get to them later. We know what Lamar brings to the table, right? Cleveland, when you have a guy like Nick Chubb, you have a top, we had him inside our top 20 in Amari Cooper at the wide receiver position. If Deshaun Watson, even with his poor outing in the last half of last season, the last 4 or 5 games, Deshaun Watson is still a much more proven quarterback than Kenny Pickett.
That performance was still better.
Listen, he got better as the year went on, as I alluded to, but there is a lot of unknown hype around him that I can't grasp. You and I are on the same page for a lot of players like that. Like when you look at the Eagles, there's a lot of hype surrounding Reed Blankenship. You and I are like, man, you got to prove it to me first. Kenny Pickett, you mentioned it. He fought with Mitchell Trubisky to get the job. He got the job. He lost the job, got the job. 7 touchdowns, 9 interceptions, 20th in QBR, had some turnover issues. He's a complete unknown, and that's why Pittsburgh has to be number 4. And you mentioned Najee Harris, right? Who came out of college highly ranked, had a very good rookie year. Rushed for over 1,000 yards last year, but averaged 3.8 yards per carry. There's no explosiveness to their running game, and that's a problem when you're talking about an unknown quarterback, right? Like if Najee Harris is going to pick up 2 yards on first down and 2 yards on second down, well, you're finding yourself in third and medium, third and long situations a lot for this quarterback who has his own issues. So I like their wide receiving core. I like Pat Freiermuth as a tight end. We'll get to their defense later, but I definitely would rank and agree with you that Pittsburgh is number 4. At number 3, I do have the Cleveland Browns. Again, when we're talking about unknown at quarterback, Deshaun Watson, while he's more proven than a Kenny Pickett, is an unknown to me right now because he was not good in the second half of last year, Scotty. 1,100 yards, 7 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, a 38.3 QBR.
Disgusting.
Oh my God, dude. But when you look at the rest of their offense, obviously he's better than Kenny Pickett. Nick Chubb, we did our running back rankings. He's the number 1 running back in the league for my money. You have a guy like Amari Cooper. You have David Njoku still. Elijah Moore comes over. Donovan Peoples-Jones. They have enough to get the job done if Deshaun Watson is serviceable. Like I'm not looking for Houston Texans Deshaun Watson anymore. I'm looking for him to be a top 15 quarterback in the league. And if he can do that with that running game and the help around him, I think the Cleveland Browns offense will be right where he should be, middle of the pack.
Yeah, no, I tend to agree with you there as well. I have the Cleveland Browns coming in at number 3 here. And it's for all the reasons you mentioned. It's the question mark at quarterback. We saw what they were able to do. They were kind of a middle of the pack team last year. But really, that was because their defense was stellar. The defense kept them in a lot of games, and they just couldn't get the production that you would expect from an offense that has the names in it that they had. They did lose a Kareem Hunt. He obviously didn't do too much last year, so it's not that huge of a loss. Nick Chubb, man, the offense needs to revolve around him. That's what it comes down to.
I agree.
And if they do that, if they're a run first, pass second team, they could move up this list. Like they could move up this list offensively, maybe to second. But as of right now, the question mark at Deshaun Watson, the question mark of what is their identity going to be, that leads me to put them here at number 3. Now, to be fair to Deshaun Watson in 2020, man, and like you said, there is no promises, no guarantees
No.
that he is going to get back to this level, but the level that he got to was ridiculous because he had over 4,800 passing yards, 33 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, a 63.7 QBR. He had 90 carries that season for 444 yards and 3 rushing touchdowns. So you talk about a guy that put up over 5,000 scrimmage yards as a quarterback, right? 33 touchdowns, so 36 touchdowns total with just 7 interceptions. And that's the level of quarterback that we know Deshaun Watson can and has played at, but we do not know where he is mentally. We do not know where he is physically after missing a season and a half. And with that being said, we can't guarantee that he will get back to that level. But with that capability inside of him, that is ultimately why you have to go with the Browns over the Steelers offense here, man. And that's why you will and only will believe in Deshaun Watson over Kenny Pickett, my man.
Yeah, I think in a decent amount of other divisions across the league, the Browns could be a little higher than third, right? They could come
that
in
run
as
offense
the
is
second best
real.
offense. Right, like look at what we do, the division we broke down last week, the AFC South. Now,
Yeah.
we would agree that the Jacksonville Jaguars offense is more explosive, right? It has the more known and better quarterback right now. So the Jags would stay 1, but easily, I think the Cleveland Browns would come in that number 2 spot behind or in front of the Tennessee Titans, the Houston Texans, and the Indianapolis Colts. So I think they're going to be a middle of the pack offense with an upside of being like the 12th, 13th best offense in the league if Deshaun Watson can get back to anywhere near he was in 2020. At number 2, 1 and 2 is closer than I expected. Once you dive into these rosters and get a little deeper than name value or than face value, like at the end of last year, it is closer. But at number 2, I'm going to stick with the Baltimore Ravens here. I've had my question marks about Lamar Jackson. You and I know this. We did a show last year where he wasn't top 10. That's no longer the case. He's definitely a top 10 quarterback for my money. But Joe Burrow is the second best quarterback in the league. Joe Burrow and this offense has been back-to-back AFC championships. Now they went out and they got Lamar some help, right? J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards should come back healthy this year. You have Rashad Bateman, Zay Flowers. You bring in Odell Beckham Jr., Nelson Aguilar, Devin Duvernay. They have a bunch of guys, is what I would say for the Baltimore Ravens. And then obviously we know his best friend is at the tight end position with Mark Andrews. But they have a lot of guys in their wide receiving room. They need at least one of them to stand out and be a true wide receiver 1. And I know a lot of people are banking on Odell Beckham Jr. to be that guy. I don't know if he is. I've seen the clips in training camp. He looks pretty good, but he's up there in age still. He didn't play last year, and he's coming off another major injury and surgery that affects the way he can move and stay on the field. People are banking on Lamar's got his number 1. This is not Odell Beckham Jr. from 4 or 5 years ago. 6 years ago, dude. It's not the same at all. So he's got a lot of wear and tear on his body. He hasn't played in over a calendar year. So I don't know what the Baltimore Ravens wide receiving core is going to produce like, but I do know that Lamar Jackson is good enough and that run game is good enough to be slotted in the number 2 offense of this division.
Yeah, no, I have the Ravens there as well. Ultimately, you get Lamar Jackson back. The key there, he's got to stay healthy. The last 2 seasons, I believe, he's only played 12 games. So when you start to talk about mobile quarterbacks, you start to talk about wear and tear on the body, missing games. Availability is one of the best characteristics that you can have. And Lamar Jackson has failed at that in the biggest moments of the season the last 2 years. So the Ravens, they simply need Lamar Jackson to be there at the end of the season when they need him most. So that's the first thing for the Ravens offense. The second thing, J.K. Dobbins, right? He's supposed to be that premier running back in that offense. We haven't seen him since he was drafted, man. Like, there's all this talk every camp that, like, J.K. Dobbins is impressing. Draft J.K. Dobbins in your draft or you're going to mistake it. Like, no, he actually just hasn't played in his first 2 years in the NFL. So he has to stay on the field. Then you go to their wide receiver one, right? It's Odell Beckham Jr. He has to stay on the field. He can't stay healthy. So they've got concerns across the board at their three staples in the offense, aside from Mark Andrews, I would say. But with that being said, this is the best wide receiving group that I've seen with Lamar
Yeah.
Jackson, at least in the last 2 to 3 seasons.
There,
You add a Zay Flowers, you add an Odell Beckham Jr., you hope Rashad Bateman can be at least your deep threat that takes the top off of the defense. So they got options there. They got Mark Andrews, of course, as we mentioned. But it comes down to health, man. They got to stay healthy. That's what it's going to come down to. And I'm with you on OBJ, man. He's one of these guys that it's kind of interesting when you look back on his career and the numbers, right? The numbers of the last couple of seasons, especially, and the amount of games played or lack thereof. And it's crazy how renowned and how big this guy's name actually is, because if he doesn't make that catch against the Cowboys, man, with the three fingers, like, is he even this big of like this? Is he even in the NFL anymore? Right? Like, because there's a lot of guys that don't get opportunities like OBJ is getting after injury after injury after injury. And mind you, I'm not sitting here trying to say he's not talented. He's talented. We've seen it in some of the biggest moments, including that Rams Super Bowl run. But even in that Super Bowl run, in the Super Bowl, he tears his ACL, right? So, like, I'm not sitting here trying to, diminish this guy because of injuries. It's just interesting to me, the narrative around OBJ for so many years. And I fell into it probably 2 or 3 years ago when I wanted him on the Eagles. Like, we would have signed him, he would have got injured. So, like, look, it's interesting, though. It's an interesting narrative around OBJ altogether, man.
The bottom line is we haven't seen him be on a football field basically in 4 years, or stay on a football field in 4 years.
Stay on one,
2019, his first year with Cleveland. 74 receptions, over 1,000 yards, 4 touchdowns. Since then, he's played in 7, 6, and 8 games and didn't play last year.
Didn't play at all.
4 years, man. He's played 21 games. So all this faith, he came into the league 9 years ago. So, like,
9 years ago.
Yeah, man. Like, remember we did Mike Evans earlier in our 11 through 20? And we were kind of having this conversation of this idea that Mike Evans still, is getting up there in age and he's 20, whatever. But we're sitting here talking about how Odell Beckham Jr. is going to help lead the Ravens and be number one for Lamar Jackson.
Right.
I just don't think that's what it is. I think that Baltimore is taking the quantity over quality route when it comes to that position group. They're just
exactly.
Nelson Aguilar's on that team. They are throwing a bunch of names in that room and hoping they can spread you out and give Lamar a bunch of decent options. Compared to what they've had in the past. To me, there is no true number one. And that's why go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I'll be honest. I think by the end of this season, given OBJ's track record of getting injured, he's going to get injured at some point in this season. I think Zay Flowers steps up into that role, man, and becomes that guy. You know who he reminds me of, ironically? He reminds me of Hollywood Brown, who they traded to the Cardinals, right? He was Lamar's number one for a while there, and I think Zay Flowers could kind of fit into that type of role as well within the offense, especially once OBJ or Rashad Bateman, who's also had injury concerns, one of those guys goes down. I think he steps into the plate and maybe becomes wide receiver one there for him.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, man. But this is why the true number one offense in this division has the true number one wide receiver, has the true number one quarterback, and that's the Cincinnati Bengals. There's no argument here. I'm sure there are some people out there that think that Lamar is so prolific that offense could outproduce the Bengals offense. No, and it's not really close. Like I said earlier in the show, Joe Burrow is the second best quarterback in the National Football League right now. That's check number one. Jamar Chase, for my money, is a top 3 wide receiver. For your money, definitely a top 7, 8 wide receiver. T. Higgins, we talked about him earlier. He could be he's one of the better number 2 wide receivers. He could be a number 1 for a lot of teams. Look, you add in Joe Mixon.
On the rest of this division, right? T. Higgins would be the wide receiver 1. Every team in the rest of the teams in this division.
It's a great point.
He would be wide receiver 1 for them. Yeah.
It's an absolute great point. And Tyler Boyd might be the best number 3 in all the National Football League.
Yeah,
he's a solid number 3 slot receiver for them, man. They've tried to bolster the offensive line over the last couple of years to protect Joe. Obviously, he's injured already, non-contact injury in camp, but he should be good to go for the regular season. So yeah, I mean, I don't think this needs much explanation. When you
Yeah,
have
I
the
think
best quarterback, when you have the best wide receiving group, you're the best offense in the division.
yeah, I think it's pretty straightforward, like you said, and then you can even take it a step further and say, what, Joe Mixon amongst this group,
Right,
probably the second best
second
running
best
back
running back.
behind Nick
Yeah.
Chubb. Yeah, so I mean, I would take Joe Mixon over Najee Harris. So even
Me
from
too.
that standpoint, they still got a better running back than three of the other teams or two of the other teams in the division. And to your point, I'm a Joe Burrow guy. He's the number 2 quarterback in the league on my rankings as well. And he's just got the mentality, right? The only concern that comes with this Bengals offense, the only concern at all for me is that calf injury to Joe Burrow that
Yeah,
he
it's health.
suffered maybe 2 weeks ago.
Mhm.
Is that really going to hold him out? I don't know. We'll see how it transpires, how it transgresses. But the only thing that concerned me with that injury was Jamar Chase basically saying, we'll hold it down until week 5. Take your rest. We're going to need you in the big moments of the season, which I think that's fair. But I don't like the idea of Joe Burrow, missing 4 or 5 games in this
No,
season for the
I
Bengals.
don't think he's going to either. Um, but I agree with you, man, because you just don't want to
It's the only
hurt
concern.
that flow at all. And there's no need. Listen, if he's not 100%, no, you don't throw him out there week 1. But if he's 100%, there would be no explanation as to just be like, you know what, we'll be fine. Because as basically what we're getting to right now, this division, it could be extremely tight. And we know,
Yeah,
yeah, the Bengals are going to be in the running for the AFC Championship again and trying to get back to a Super Bowl. But that doesn't mean they're going to win this division. We can
yeah,
talk about that in a little bit, but it's definitely going to be a dogfight for this division. Let's head on
absolutely.
over to the defensive side of the ball. Again, a very, very um, close, tight race for the rankings here. At number
Yeah,
4, let me just check my notes. Yeah, I do have the Cincinnati Bengals. And it's crazy because I think all 4 teams can make the argument that they're top half of the league in defense. Like,
yeah.
I think the Bengals are a middle of the pack, top 15, 16, 17 type of unit, right?
They
Maybe
play
a
up
little
in big
higher.
moments, though.
Right.
Yeah,
DJ Reader, BJ Hill, they have a good pass rush. They've taken a hit a little bit in the secondary the last offseason or two.
Jesse
So that's why
Bates.
they kind of come
Yeah,
down for me, man. But I do like their linebackers. Obviously, we wanted Logan Wilson very badly as Eagles fans. Trey Hendrickson. They have a lot of guys up front. They're hurting a little bit in the secondary depth wise.
yeah.
But I would have the Bengals at number 4 compared to what's ahead of them.
Yeah, yeah. I actually, I started with the Bengals at 3, ended up moving them down ultimately because of the losses that they suffered in their secondary. Jesse Bates, as much as people like to hate on Eli Apple, he talked a lot of stuff, but he also did play very well in big moments for this team. And this is a team where their defense, they don't have to be ranked the best in this division, right?
No.
They don't need the high regards because their defensive coordinator Lou, I can't remember his name. I know it starts with an A. I don't know how to pronounce it. The
Yeah.
defensive
I
coordinator,
know.
he got really popular after his outing
Yeah.
against the Buffalo Bills in the playoffs last postseason. But nonetheless, they like to blitz the quarterback. They like to force turnovers. They're a very opportunistic defense where they might not rank the best statistically throughout the season. They might not have the most interceptions, the most sacks, or give up the least amount of yards. But at the end of the day, they'll make those big plays in big moments. And that's what I do like about this defense. But when you look at them across the board against these other 3 defenses, it sucks, but it's not I don't want to say it's not close. It's just there's no argument there that I
Yeah.
can put any of these other defenses below this defense, as good as they are, middle of the pack, whatever you want to call them.
Yeah, no, I agree with you wholeheartedly. At number 3, hold on one second. That's right. I switched. That's why I was wondering. At number 3, I did have the
I
Ravens
switched
at
as well.
2. I slid them back to 3, and I'm going over this roster over this depth chart, man. And tell me what I'm missing. They have great linebackers. Trust me, I get that. Okay, Roquan Smith and Patrick Queen are a hell of a duo, and you have
Yeah.
Kyle Hamilton, Marcus Williams, Marlon Humphrey. They're great in the back end. They took a hit up front, did they not?
Yeah, no Calais Campbell.
I mean, Scotty, I'm looking at their front 3, their front 4, and there's a lack of pass rushes up there for them, which is something that made this team pretty ferocious. And I know their linebackers get downhill and they're very good in the run game, and they can get after the quarterback as well. But they're lacking on the defensive line of this
Yeah.
unit. So I did drop them to 3. That's not to say, I mean, again, you're talking about a Ravens team that could make an argument that they're a top, 10, 12 unit in the league. But I just think that the other 2 defenses have more talent on them and are going to, and it's going to pay dividends for that side of the ball.
Man, you make a compelling case. You do. Because I actually have the Steelers here at number 3, and it's interesting,
Okay.
man, because originally I was gonna ride with the Bengals and their opportunistic defense over the Steelers, actually. And then I actually took a look at the Steelers defense, and I love the additions that they made in the secondary with Patrick Peterson. They drafted Joey Porter Jr. Obviously, they have Minkah Fitzpatrick back there, who's one of the best safeties in the NFL. And it starts up front with TJ Watt, right? Coming off that edge, he's arguably the best pass rusher in the NFL. Probably up there with another guy in this division that is pretty renowned. It's probably between those two and a couple others. But nonetheless, I ultimately ended up going with the Steelers here at number 3, just because I like the linebackers so much for the Ravens. But you make a great point, because pass rush is ultimately more important on my scale when it comes to defense. So I think I'm going to move the Steelers up to number 2, man. I think you made a compelling argument. I don't change my rankings often, but I think I am going to move the Steelers up to number 2 just because of TJ Watt and Cameron Hayward. I mean, those guys are monsters on that defensive line. And you mentioned it. Calais Campbell went to the Atlanta Falcons. The Ravens no longer have him. So I guess I'm giving my 3 and my 2 here right now, but nonetheless, I'm gonna put the Ravens actually at number 3. Although I do love their secondary, I love their linebackers. I think their secondary is ultimately what was pushing me towards putting them at number 2, because I love Marlon Humphrey, I love Kyle Hamilton. Name slip in my head there. The other safety, Marcus Williams, the other safety. And then they did get Rock Ya-Sin from the Raiders, I believe. He used to be a Colt, but he's a pretty sturdy corner. They did lose Marcus Peters, though, which was their CB2. But that pass rush, as I really think back on it, pass rush means so much more to me than probably any other piece of a defense. So with that being said, I am actually going to go with the Steelers at number 2 with those elite pass rushers up front.
Yeah, man. At number 2, it's interesting because I persuaded you to adjust there, and you're almost persuading me to adjust my 1-2. At number 2, I had the Cleveland Browns, actually.
Interesting.
Yeah, I had the Cleveland Browns at 2. The addition of Zadarius Smith is awesome. And it's tough, man, because on paper, this defense is probably the most talented. Myles Garrett and Zadarius Smith coming off the edge. You look at the middle of this unit. You have Shelby Harris is coming off the bench in this rotation after Dalvin Tomlinson. We know what JOK can do. Denzel Ward, Grant Delpit, Juwan Thornhill, and Greg Newsome are a hell, and they have Rodney McLeod, a hell of a cornerback and safety room, a hell of a secondary is what I meant to say. I love everything about this defense. I'll skip ahead to my number 1. I had the Steelers 1 because of the culture and the coach. That's what it comes down to for me. I think the talent is right here. The gap is not big, but I believe in what the Steelers do defensively more than I believe in what the Browns are going to do this year. You already started to talk about the pass rush for the Steelers. Yeah. Cam Hayward and TJ Watt, like I just mentioned who the Browns have. You're not getting better than TJ Watt in this game. And then you add in Cameron Hayward. They have a couple other pieces up front as well, but their secondary is very good too. You go out, you draft Joey Porter Jr., like you mentioned. You go out, you get Patrick Peterson, DeMonte Casey, and Minkah Fitzpatrick if they can stay healthy. You brought in Keanu Neal. He's coming off the bench. I think all 4 defenses are talented. I think the top 2 in the Browns and the Steelers to me are right here. They're neck and neck. But I believe in the defensive mind that Mike Tomlin is, along with those coordinators, because that's what the Steelers were based on even last year. They were beat up, bad quarterback play, but they still won. Did they win 7 games last year, 8 games last year? Because their defense. was so stale.
Trying to
Yeah,
get their team pulled up here.
my Wi-Fi is
Yeah,
so
it's
messed
not
up. I don't
working.
know if it's bad over here, but um that's what they're built on, man. So I do trust them culturally, defensively wise, more than I do the Cleveland Browns. So Steelers 1, Browns 2, Ravens 3, Bengals 4 for me. You have the Browns number 1.
Yeah, I do have the Browns number 1, man. And what I was ultimately going off of here, you already mentioned all the talent that they have on the defensive side of the ball, including Myles Garrett, who I would put into that conversation with TJ Watt. Ultimately, the reason I went with the Browns, I looked at some rankings from last year, and it looks like season ago, the Cleveland Browns had a top 10 defense according to the NFL.com rankings. The Browns had the 6th ranked overall defense in the entire league a year ago, returning 9 of 11 starters to this defensive unit. So just kind of picking up where they left off last year, and now you add a better offense, hopefully, with Deshaun Watson under a full training camp. Hopefully can take a little bit of taxing off of that defense to make them even better. But with that being said, something that I did not take into account when thinking about this, although I'm going to stick with the Browns as my number 1 defense here, I just wanted to kind of give even more detail to maybe boasting up the Steelers defense a little bit even more.
Sure.
But nonetheless, TJ Watt missed 7 games last year for that defense.
A lot, yeah.
That is a big asshole in your defensive line and your pass rush.
And did you see the correlation between wins when he's off the field and on? When TJ Watt plays, the Steelers win football games.
When he plays, they win football games, and that defense is elite.
Yeah.
So it's hard to imagine what that Steelers defense looks like last season with a full season of TJ Watt off the edge. So just to give even more fuel to my moving the Steelers up from 3 to 2 and, stapling them in as one of the better defenses in this division. I like the Steelers a lot. I think you could call it a toss-up in reality. I like your point about the coaching as well with Mike Tomlin, a defensive-minded coach. So they got the pedigree there. I think the Browns are building that pedigree. We should see some heavy clashes next year between this
absolutely,
division.
Man. And guys, if you're watching this, let us know in the comments what your rankings are. Let us know what you would change, what we got wrong, what we got right. Because the rankings are tough, man. Going through and doing these position player rankings, and then you get to a division on the same day like this one, it's tough. Like again, you had different rankings than me. If someone else wants to tell me that they think the Ravens are going to be the best defense in this division,
right?
I can't argue with you. This is just how I would lay it out in terms of coaching. What I look for in a defense, like you said, we value pass rush. And maybe that's just the Eagles rubbing off on us, but we value pass rush greatly compared to other positions and what they can provide for the defense. So let's get into our standings, man. Who comes away with the division title? I'll start at number 4. I'll just run down quickly and throw it to you before we get into our fantasy draft here. At number 4, this is going to be very, very tight. And I honestly think like the bottom 2 teams, I think are going to be fighting for wild cards, to be honest with you. And I think one's going to be like 9-8, one's going to be like 8-9 or tied with a tiebreaker. At number 4, I do have the Pittsburgh Steelers. I know that sounds crazy given that I said they're the best defense in this division. I think they have the best head coach in this division. I like their wide receiving room. But what it ultimately comes down to for me is this defense, while it can be elite, A, needs to stay healthy, which I haven't seen over the last 2 years. And B, is it enough to overcome what your quarterback play is going to be? I'm not a Kenny Pickett believer yet. So to me, when I'm looking around at the rest of these defenses and the rest of these skill position groups for the other teams in this division, I can't put the Steelers ahead of them. Shout out to our guy, Mark Henry Jr. He's very high on the Steelers this year. He actually might have them winning the division or something. I'm not there. I think they're going to be around a 500 squad, 8-9, maybe 9-8, but it's not going to be good enough to win this division.
Yeah, Steelers coming in at number 4 for me as well. It's interesting. Our guy Mark has them winning the division potentially. I have to look into that further to see if that's the case because that's interesting.
I think he does.
But to be fair, I mean, any of these teams could win the division. Like,
Oh,
it's not out of the
yeah,
realms of possibilities, to be fair to these teams.
I agree.
But I went with the Steelers as well because while we talk about the trenches and how important they are, so is quarterback play, and that's where it weighs down for me. The three quarterbacks in this division, obviously, question mark with Deshaun Watson. I'm still taking him in a landslide over Kenny Pickett at the end of the
Yeah.
day. So I'm looking at the three other quarterbacks in this division as significantly better than Kenny Pickett.
Right.
And ultimately, I think that's going to drain that Pittsburgh Steelers team. It's going to end up in the defense being on the field too much. And then what's that lead to? Like you said, it leads to injuries from wear and tear. So we'll see how it ultimately goes. I agree. One of the top defenses in this division and in the league here. But that offense
Yeah.
is kind of weighing it down. And the more I think about the offense, the more down on it I get, as I'm noticing throughout this show.
I
I'm
think
not gonna
Najee
lie.
Harris is going to be a huge X factor this year for the
Is he
Steelers'
good or
success.
not? Is he efficient or
Because
not?
because when you look at things that we love to kind of evaluate, right? How do you win
Yeah,
football? Can you run the ball and can you play defense? Right.
yeah,
How you win championships.
yeah,
Um, if Najee Harris is going to average 3.5 yards per carry, it's not worth shit. And Kenny Pickett's going to have to overcome too much. He's going to turn the ball over, and they're not going to be good enough. At number 3, this is tough, man, but I am going to go with the Cleveland Browns here. Again, a lot of this comes down to quarterback play for me. I don't know what Deshaun Watson I'm going to get this season. And then not just that, like I know we had them offensively ahead of the Ravens, but after we kind of went through all the different options the Ravens are throwing out there, yeah, you have Nick Chubb, and I completely agree with you. If you are a run-first team and Watson only throws the ball, 26, 27 times a game, I think that's the recipe for success there. But all you have really is Amari Cooper. Elijah Moore is okay, right?
unproven.
Donovan Peoples-Jones is okay, right?
Yeah,
They don't have enough. So I
yeah.
had the Browns coming in at number 3.
Yeah, actually, I had the Browns offense number 3 as well. Honestly,
Okay.
I think you did too. I feel like you booked him at number 3.
Yeah.
Yeah, it comes down to quarterback play because we can't trust Deshaun Watson. Let's put this in perspective. We can't trust
Mhm.
Deshaun Watson as much as Lamar Jackson and Joe Burrow. And
Correct.
that's what it comes down to. It also comes down to weapons around him. I would agree with you. While you have Nick Chubb, the running game should be great. It should be electric as it has been. But they've had a good running game for how many years now, right? And it hasn't worked. They need a quarterback that can get the ball down the field. Mari Cooper is great. I think he's a good wide receiver. I had him top 20. You had him as an honorable mention. I would agree with that as well. But where else? Elijah Moore. I love Elijah Moore. I love the idea of him. I wanted the Eagles to take a flyer on him as wide receiver 3, not wide receiver 2. And that's what it comes down to. That's a lot of potential base. There's nothing actually on paper that shows you that Elijah Moore is a good wide receiver in the NFL. So there's a lot of hope that is based in Elijah Moore. Donovan Peoples-Jones, as you mentioned, he's an okay receiver. We'll see what the offensive line is like. They've been pretty steady, right? Able to keep that run game alive. But this offense, it doesn't wow me. It's very middle of the pack, kind of just giving off those type of vibes to me. Now, if Deshaun Watson, man, he is the X factor in this offense. We talked about Najee Harris in Pittsburgh's offense. Deshaun Watson is that question mark, that X factor in the Cleveland Browns offense, because if he can tap into anything that he was showing in Houston in 2020, this Cleveland Browns offense is going to be a lot better. But with that being said, the weapons, they just don't move me, man. They don't move me more than the other two teams in this division.
Yeah. No, I agree with you, man. And coming in at number 2, obviously, I think a lot of people are going to be in agreement here as to who 1 and 2 are. I believe last year when we got into the regular season, I think we were on the same page that the Bengals would make the playoffs and go further, but the Ravens would win the division because they were built for the regular season more. I'm not there anymore. I believe too much in Joe Burrow and this offense. The defense has been built up enough for Cincinnati, and the Ravens lost enough in their front 4 for me to where I have the Ravens at 2 and the Bengals winning this division. It's Joe Breezy's division, man. And listen, we look at the Chiefs, right? And no matter how good that division is, we keep saying, it's Patty's division. That's where I'm at with Joe Burrow.
Yeah.
That's how good and elevated Joe Burrow is above the rest of the league, where it's his division. So I had the Bengals winning it.
Man, this is weird for me because I did pick the Ravens to win the division
Okay.
here,
No,
man.
listen,
And
it's a fair pick. I just think it's Joey B's division.
it's not based on anything factual though. I will say
Huh?
that. It's more or less of a feeling. And you had the Ravens who were just riddled with injuries last season.
Mhm.
It kind of dwindled them down, made them not as effective. I think maybe their luck just goes a little bit better this year, and maybe Lamar Jackson can stay healthy for the full season. And I just think in the division that is so tight like this, it's really hard to win a division, 2, 3 times in a row if you're the
Yeah.
Bengals. So with that being said, I did side with the Ravens, but what I would go ahead and say out loud to be transparent, um, I think the Bengals are the best team in this division. I mean that wholeheartedly. I think they are a better team than the Baltimore Ravens. I think that Joe Burrow is a better quarterback than Lamar Jackson. I just have this weird feeling in me that everything isn't going to kind of fall into place for the Bengals to win this division. I think they'll ultimately still make the playoffs. Similar to what we said last year, I guess. But with that being said, I'm giving a little bit of respect to the Ravens here, I guess, and just kind of picking a different division winner. But I
Yeah.
do think it's between these two teams, and I would take it as far as to say I do believe the Bengals are the best team in this
Yeah.
division.
All right. That's going to do it for our AFC North breakdown. Don't forget to subscribe to the Turf Talk YouTube channel.